the inspectorate with Captain Phillips? Do you know how?
It's phoned by IDEC, and they tell her that they want dockets that are sitting in inspectorate. The question you should be asking first, how did they get to the inspectorate to start with? Now, the state, the province where the dockets come from, if you go and check their system, I believe even today, those dockets are still open. Those dockets were transferred from that station to the provincial office. That's what the system will tell you. How they move from there to inspectorate, from inspectorate to IDEC, when the portfolio committee of police calls us to account and they want to know the status of those dockets, the system will tell you they are still at the provincial office in Gauteng, and yet Gauteng has never seen them.
Okay, I know that you got rogue elements within IDEC, so I'm not going to do that. I suppose it's just trying to join the dots of everything finally. This gentleman, Mr. Steve Matsumi, I know you've been asked a few questions about him, but I'm more interested to know of him and what the SAPS officials know of him, that you would have even said in your text message to General Sinona. You would have even said, you are risking your lives. Don't blame me if you are found out and you're risking your life. General, that's quite a loaded statement, especially coming from a police officer. So who is this man and what's his modus operandi that even you, General, say, don't blame me if something happens to you? What did you think would happen to them?
Well, I was only relaying a message because I put those words there because they had pleaded with me not to expose our conversation to him. Their explanation about Steve Matsumi was that he's the one who has taken over from the Big Five. That's what they were telling me. And they say this man controls just officials to business. That's why that's money from him. Party here in Sentin, and this is what it does. Okay. So they are
General, I want to disagree with something that you said earlier. In fact, I believe that you were reprimanding the MPs, where you were talking about them and about us and, having opinions. General, we're not a court of law here. We're public representatives. And we are not obliged to either be impartial or objective. We represent the views of people, and from time to time, you'll hear us saying even things that people are saying out there. So I want to disagree with the notion that we cannot have views on a matter. Where you are correct is that once all that is said and done, we then need to objectively apply our minds to what we've heard. But it can't be. I disagree with you when you want to reprimand MPs for either demonstrating an affinity or lack of affinity to a particular witness. I don't think that is the role of the MPs. And I'm laying this as a background because I want to come to now where I disagree with you. And I think there's always been two issues. And I was hoping that by the time you come back, because when I asked you the first time, especially around issues of evidence around Minister one of the things you said was that, no, Khumalo is going to come here. Ask him, he'll give you evidence. And unfortunately, General Khumalo came, there was no evidence. He said there was no evidence. General Masemula, and so forth and so forth. Now, that point has already been canvassed by members. I don't need to go back. But on the overreach of power, please do comment on this so we close it and we move, right? You've said today that, and I'm happy you said this, right? And this is not because I'm defending Minister Mkhwanazi. I honestly did not believe that Minister Mkhwanazi was part of a drug cartel. Influenced, you believed that he was misled. Then you said, and when you were explaining that, you said, that's why you wanted to speak to him, so that you could just advise him, right? And maybe if the national commissioner says all he disagreed with was approach, né? That it shouldn't be immediately, but rather phased in over time. And if I put it to you that it was only then when you got the downloads from Minister Matlala that you then began to put together this whole issue of defeating the ends of justice and misrepresentation. But before that, it was never about whether he had the authority or not. You disagree with that?
I repeat again, Honourable Member. I think it was on the 2nd, if not the 3rd of January, shortly after the letter came out, that I reached out to the minister because I was against that which he wrote there. I was not against in the main about issues of intelligence because I did not know the background around it. Knowing that the regulation that's been amended gives him the powers now, and the SAPS management has not challenged that. So I assume that one is within him. I did not know what was happening with the border security. It does not fall under my command, so I didn't pay attention. What I was concerned about his role in taking a decision to shut down a team, is that what was concerning me? And when I spoke and made some examples strongly with the chief of staff, he said, correct message, I do not know. But the minister took offense of that. That's why he advised the chief of staff to record me in a second conversation. So when the chief of staff came the second time around, and I'm sure you heard it in a conversation, that the only thing I wanted to do was to sit down with my leader and talk to him. He did not afford me that opportunity. Instead, he sent people to record me, which means the decision he took on the 31st, he took it consciously. He knew what he was busy with. Okay. The time passes by. I see all the wrong in between. That made me realize something is still not right. Again, in April, I sent him a message requesting for an audience.
General, I'm so sorry. I hear you. I hear you. I'm in injury time now. Don't you find it strange, General, that every single officer that we have spoken to says they did not know Mr. Matlala until they read in December what of his contract and whatnot? I'm finding that very, very hard to believe, and I'll tell you why. The meeting at the Pearls happens on
in April last year.
In April last year.
Yes.
This is April that other year.
The incident of Matlala for contract is 2024.
Yes, 2024.
Yes.
You meet him in 2025.
That time I know about the investigations against him, about the contract, everything. I
So
did not deny that.
when you were setting up then the sting operation with criminal intelligence, this guy had not been in your radar until the News 24 story about his contract.
Well, I do not know what was happening at head office. But Ket Matlala, I think when he comes into the picture with the team, it's the team that is investigating the drug issues, the Vereeniging case. As they're investigating the Vereeniging case, then they pick up the links that brings this case into forensic, into detectives, and then Ket Matlala pops in. That's how they pick it up. That's why they raid in this.
So that's long before Minister Mkhwanazi cancels the thing on the 20th of December, right? Because those investigations happened and then they culminated on the interventions or the actions on the 6th of December.
Yeah, that's why I kept on saying, Honorable Member, Minister Mkhwanazi arrives there in June, July of 2024, but he writes a directive in December. I don't even think he knew what is the annual performance plan of the police look like. And the strategic plan, but he writes a disbandment of the team. So the period tells me that the minister was not aware about what's happening, and he was influenced to take this decision. I believe still that in the presence of the minister, I was not in that meeting, but when the minister sits in a meeting and he says, there's a problem about this contract, I think we need to cancel it, or whether those words he used or not. But looks like he's the one, the Minister who initiated the cancellation. From
Yes,
what I
and
gather.
that's what I'm saying, General. And the police knew about Ket Matlala even before the minister said cancel this thing because
That's
he was
correct.
being investigated. Isn't that strange that they let it go? They're busy investigating. They know this guy is here, but he's still doing health services for the police, and nobody claims to know him until the story breaks in December.
But the team already knows about the criminality that involves him on drugs. It's not the same people that are part of these contracts. So I don't even think, sitting here now, if you ask me the contracts that you have in the police, I won't tell you.
Okay.
Because I don't pay attention on those. I'll focus on what I do in my province. But there are many contracts we have in the organization. I don't believe the team was aware about the awarding of the contract and all those things as to who is involved. Even me, I didn't even know there's a contract given, who is the contractor. It's one of those things that we don't get involved from the operation side.
How do you then, when you think about this, how do you explain Minister flagging this contract and calling for its cancellation? Because it's one of the things that he puts forward
I
and
applaud
says,
it.
why would I do this if I'm working with them?
No, I applaud that. And I'm still saying again, I don't think Minister knew Ket Matlala. It is after the decision when Ket Matlala approaches Brown Mahouts to complain that this man I'm feeding through you is doing this.
Okay.
That
Right
what
there on
sparked the action
feeding.
from Ket Matlala, from Hotsi and Suleiman in Northwest. Because Ket Matlala is crying to them that you are saying to me, I must pay for this January 8 and this on behalf of the minister. But here is a minister taking a decision. So I like to believe a minister will not take a decision against Ket Matlala if he knew that Ket Matlala is supporting him financially. Surely he didn't know him. That's why he takes a decision, because it's been played by these Mokotsis and them.
General, I know that the investigations are still ongoing, but to date, have you found any evidence of Ket Matlala financially supporting the minister, using your words, whether it's for his presidential campaign? Remember, you said Brown Mahotsi is an information peddler, takes things and make it as if. So I don't think it's beyond the realm of possibility that Brown Mahotsi goes around and says, I'm telling the minister this, I'm doing this. In fact, that was the view that I got. Do you believe that you are, I am respecting the fact that you said there's investigations, but you are close to finding a link between Minister, money, Ket Matlala?
Well, the investigation happening in KZN, I've not been briefed about that. But the investigation happening in Gauteng, again, I cannot confirm because it's not in my space. What I believe still to date is that in the main, minister's role that leads into the criminal investigation is the action of that letter, is the interference with the police work. And when there's efforts to try and bring this to their attention, he doesn't want to take it, which therefore means he's been influenced and he believes the people that influenced him. If that was not the case, I wouldn't understand why will I ask for a meeting with the minister. He calls me to come to Pretoria on behalf of SBIA, peace talk. He still acknowledges my request, but he let me go back to Durban without even engaging me on that one. He is a Brand Mkhwanazi that is his comrade. I raise issues in the open meeting of parliament about Brand Mkhwanazi. He doesn't pause to question, but what did Brand do? So that he can get to hear more. He doesn't, he just brush it off and he continues with Brand. So it's a person that you are warning about what's happening and he ignores you. What can you do? You can conclude that means he's aware of what's happening.
Okay.
So without you having a concrete evidence, but his attitude tells you that he knows very well what's happening. It just makes sure that it cannot be traced. He push it far away and he operates from the distance.
Okay. Now, you also took umbrage with the reasons that he advanced for the disbandment, right? Cost effectiveness and cost, and then the effectiveness of the PKTT. I won't go into that, but he did put a reason that I also thought was probably plausible when he said the PKTT should be a national PKTT. Do you dispute that?
You cannot arrive here and you say your surname is Mkhwanazi, whereas my surname is Mkhwanazi. So he arrives in the police, PKTT is on black and white, written. He comes and he adds an N on top of it. Where does he get it from? So he started creating his own thing. And all members, with respect, this team started in 2018. Everything written on this paper does not have an N. But when he comes in,
that's not my question. Okay,
No.
I want to stop you because my question is, he says part of the reason why he wanted to disband it was so that he could spread the capacity throughout the country. I mean, I was talking to you now about Eastern Cape and the need for a similar thing in other provinces. I'm sure you just said they opened in Gauteng. So one of the reasons he raises is that you needed a national PKTT. First, he says that was a national police task team operating in KwaZulu-Natal, but then he wanted to disband it so that they could spread the capacity of the PKTT across the country. You disagree with that
I
reason?
disagree. That's why I'm starting with the N. Because in his mind, it's a national thing. I can do what I like. Wrong, Minister. This is in province, KZN. So it does not have an N. That's a start. Second to that, you sign a letter on the 31st of December after you figure out that you need to reorganize the service. You disband this, you close the post, freeing of the vacancies and stuff like that. There is no work study. There is no this and that here. When you are asked, you start running around and finding reasons. The reasons of money, the CFO comes here and say, no, Minister, money was not a problem. Find something else. He says it before you. She said it before you. And then the minister goes and phones someone somewhere in a witness protection and say, please give me a statement, and that person records it. And they present it. Oh, this reason doesn't fly. What another reason? Another reason this and that. So the minister try and figure out to justify the action, okay, because he had no material to justify it.
3 minutes left.
Yes.
Sorry, I get your answers. I'm not interrupting you. Very quickly, you said that you once took one of the cars that was meant for the king and you put it on operations. I think that's a laudable thing. But also, I remember yesterday, Honorable Skosan raised a question around traditional leaders, kings in particular. General Masemula said only 2 are being protected. Now that the mandate of the PKTT has been expanded to include traditional leaders, 1 is the traditional leaders only in KwaZulu-Natal, and 2, what about the rest of the traditional leaders, especially the kings throughout the country? Is there any plan for security around them? Is there any plan for even security and threat analysis, or do you just leave them like that? If I could get a shortened version of the answer so that I can pose my last one.
I'm going to request honorable members that you look at the legislation and guide us as South African Police Service on what to do. There is no responsibility given by the law to the South African Police Service to protect the kings. The only kings we look after are the heads of states, the king of Eswatini, amongst others. Those are the ones we protect when they come to the country. The ones in the country, there's no legal authority we have.
But General Masemula said there are 2 that you look.
We have no legal authority. Listen to what I'm saying, honorable member. We are doing it. The Portfolio Committee of Police, the Auditor General of South Africa don't hold us into account. So we continue doing it.
All right, so that's a reform that we need to look at. Lastly, General, please can you, because I know that I'll be stopped before I finish, I want to ask you to comment on the Zulu War issue, but then I had told you that I had fundraised some questions for you, so I'm going to throw this so that this person is not upset with me. The person is called Nhlanhla, and they say, I don't have a question for the General, just tell him we love him and we shall always stand by him. What a man, what a giant, history will remember him. So I wanted to pass on that message, you General. I won't pass on the ones of the many, many ladies who have sent me messages to you. Can you please comment on the Zulu War, General?
I think, honorable member, there is, and I would like you to take it to your own political party, because from my assessment where I'm sitting, there is a problem between the former minister and the current minister, Minister Mkhunu and former Minister Cele. What is the problem? I don't know. And we somehow, I feel like we're getting caught in the middle, and we are painted as the people that are siding with this one and not that one. We worked with Cele. We worked very well. He's gone. He's no longer minister. We have a new minister. We must work with a new minister. I pleaded with the minister to come and visit KZN. Minister Mkhwanazi will tell you that. So we can brief him about policing in KZN. He has not done that. Now, when people are then influencing him that we are Cele's people, if he takes that attitude, it then creates more divide. And an outsider will then say it's a Zulu war.
Thank you so much.
That is the unfortunate reality.
Yeah,
Thank you, General. Thank you, Chairperson.
the grace period of the member has expired. I want us to take a break, Chief Whip. Otherwise, we are going to sit for 4 hours. We are left with 3 speakers now. We must take a break and come after 15 minutes, which will be 20 to 11. We are taking a break.
Ngiyakuzwela bakuphethe yona. The race.
Chief Whip. Chief Whip. It's now 22. The time that we have agreed we are going to start.
Which one?
Yeah. We are witnessless. Thank you, General. We can proceed. I think we're taking the last lap now.
No, thank you very much, Chairperson, and good evening, General. Thank you very much, Shamas. I think I just want to make a follow-up on the last question from Honorable Sangon. This issue about the so-called Zulu War. When I heard about it, my impression was that maybe it might also be a reference to Mkhwanazi and Sbiya, because I thought Sbiya can also be somebody from KZN or who's a Zulu or something like that. But you are raising another version of it. What's your comment on that?
Yeah, well, my belief was that perhaps it's amongst the people that are talking about the Zulu War, because although Sbiya being the Zulu, but is not necessarily from KZN. It is that which I thought politically between the two heads, a head and a former head of this institution, that are perceived to be in loggerheads, that seems to be suggesting that there is issues that are happening in here. And what is worse is that the two individuals that are seen in the police that have been thrown into this is myself and General Khumalo, who are both from KZN. That seems to suggest something like that. But yeah, those are the things that I think about. It might be.
I just want to take you back a bit to the comment you made about, and maybe I know you have somehow commented on this issue. You do not have to go into detail. The migration of people from the police to IDEC and the impact that has had in relation to the work of IDEC and probably the relationship between the police and IDEC. In your knowledge, the people who left the police to become employees of IDEC, were some of them already engaged in some kind of a fight of one form or another with their former colleagues or with their colleagues before they departed from police to IDEC, which could have therefore sustained that and maybe heighten it by the fact that they are now at IDEC, some kind of a watchdog of some sort towards the police, and therefore might be exploiting that authority in furtherance of their own differences with their former colleagues.
Well, I'm not quite sure exactly about the people that have moved from the police to IDEC and the beef they had with the police, except I have heard of some talks about one member at IDEC with Gerald Patlani. Because it looks like at one stage they were all working, I don't know if at forensic, but the other one was at the Eastern Cape, Patlani was at the head office. But there were always issues that I heard about that involves, but to what extent, I never really investigated. But that is the only person that I know to having had issues. The other one that is with IDEC is the one that is an investigating officer on Gerald Kumalo and his team. That's Padayache. Padayache is an ex-crime intelligence member with a lot of controversial things within, including the listening, illegal listening of Gerald Cele back in the days when he was still a general in the police, when he was still a national commissioner. Illegal interception of his phone, mispresentation to the judge. But that part actually left the police. I'm told he retired. And then he resurfaces at IDEC. And his interest or his involvement in this is focused on intelligence. That's why he's a lead investigator on people at intelligence. The court says, if you want something at crime intelligence, go via Padayache. So he's the only person, but whether he had any beef with anyone, I don't know. But I know that perhaps he still wants the control of the things that he had control over before he retired. And I know of the members of IPED that left IPED and went to IDEC. Whether some of those were in the police before, I do not know. Whether some of those were involved on issues against the police or investigation against the police, that is a fact that they moved with case dockets from IP to IDEC. And they continued with those investigations at IDEC, which is supposed to be an IP docket, but it landed at IDEC. So maybe if we do an audit of the dockets at IDEC, and then they must explain to you how those dockets got there, whether did they follow the law, are they part of what the IDEC is established for, you'll be able to get evidence.
You know, when we had Mr. O'Sullivan, as you would have noticed, very, very flamboyant, very colorful in terms of what he says and how we put it. But one of the things that he said, which as I listened to him, I said, when we see you, I'm going to pose that question to you, was that at some point you took over a particular company, which he says was owned by a dubious character, which in his own view, somebody at your level of leadership in the police would have known about and possibly avoid a possibility of taking over a company from a previous owner of that caliber. So, and I think from judging from what he was saying, he wanted to make an insinuation about the extent to which you are either reckless, if that is true in terms of what happened with that company, or you acquired that company from a character you knew is not a good character, but nevertheless you proceeded, because it may very well be that you have some link with that kind of a character. So I thought when we see you, we must ask you to comment on that issue, because it is obviously worrying if it's anything to go by.
Yeah, well, I listened to Mr. Paul O'Sullivan. I think, honorable members, what you should be worried about is why will Paul O'Sullivan come and talk about the private things that are involving police officers? He went and he did on information about all of us. That's why he could tell the National Commissioner owns this property and that property and that property. He went to dig things about me. The only thing that he found that maybe he thought, okay, well, maybe this is questionable was that company. So how did he get to go to that extent to finding information? What is it about? What gives him the right to do that? This is what I expect these parliamentarians to take action against, because that means the systems that are supposed to be protecting individuals out there from their privacy is not working. If a person can do that and he comes and sits in this parliament and he displays that he has done it and he walks out here without being held accountable, that's a concern, because the private is invaded. Here I am left with today is the 18th of March. 12 days time, my contract ends. I knew that back in 2021 when I took that contract, that is going to end of this March. So in my effort to try and prepare for an exit in the organization, on what do, I engage with accountants that are advising me on what I should do next. So one of the advice that perhaps I must consider buying a company, chef company, that can help me to set up opportunities going forward. So it's one of the companies they recommended to me when they did some research to establish, and there's one of the company that's on the shelf company dealing with trade and investment that I must consider looking at. So I then take over that company, buy it off. I don't see anything wrong on the character of the person because I never really went into an investigation that Paul O'Sullivan did. So I buy the company, I don't even know the person. So it's a shelf company that get acquired and I pay for it and the membership, the directorate is changed. And I don't even use it because the company I'm trying to get for the future, try to set up something for the future. But then I felt, no, well, I don't think I'll be able to use this company now. So I closed it. After closing, Mr. Paul O'Sullivan went to dig, what do I have? He discovered that I once owned this company. That's why he came to you and he spoke about a company that I've already closed. And I had bought it, but I then since closed it. I didn't close it because there were some dubious things on it. I closed it because I felt that there's no need for me to have it. So that was the reason. So what he came and he presented here is not true. And there's no criminal activities that I'm associated with the company. But again, I want to ask you to investigate what gave him authority to do that? And how did he acquire that information? Because if it's not taken to task with it, it's going to be abused, and I believe it has already.
No, General, I can give you an assurance that the conduct of Mr. O'Sullivan in the security cluster in our country, the police in particular, left so many questions for us, and it leaves a lot to be desired. And I don't think that at the conclusion of our work, we would not take any position with regard to individuals like him, who, for whatever reasons, immerse themselves into the police service and do so to a very large extent in a negative way, in a way that either creates or sustains existing problems. So I do want to give you an assurance that when we wrap up our work, it's inevitable that we must have an opinion about such characters and what needs to be done legislatively to protect that environment from possible abuse by characters such as those ones. But I mean, be that as it may, I would imagine that if you had not changed your mind, you kept the company and you proceeded with it and you discovered this information later on, you were obviously going to be worried about it if there is legitimacy to it, and probably you were going to have to change your mind and look for another company, I suppose.
That's correct.
Okay. Somewhere I read that, I can't remember on which of the papers before us, affidavits or submissions that were made, that at some point you presided over an inquiry which was dealing with some matters of discipline relating to General Khan.
That's correct.
That he got acquitted.
Yes.
With the benefit of hindsight, with what you know now about Mr. Khan, would you say that that acquittal would have been the same, could be the same if you were dealing with him today? Or there may be other factors that influence the facts that appeared before that committee, which resulted in that particular conclusion?
I would have done the same. In a matter of fact, before I went for that hearing, there were already negative stories out in the media as a result of me presiding over his case. And I already knew that he is involved in one way or another on the wrong that led in such, which he came to apologize to me about whatever that came out after I acquitted him. And I still told him that I don't want to be part of that. We're here dealing with a case that was put before you, and the evidence that was presented. He did not do anything wrong. I gave him credit. I even said he should have been applauded by the organization for what he did.
You know, General, some of us were very worried when Mr. Nkabinde was very casual about your trip to Richards Bay or Mpange, that site.
Yes.
We're very worried about that level of casualty on his part. And when you are saying today, the evidence at your disposal, beside the information, the knowledge you have, because we're part of this, is that, and that can even be corroborated by a tracker information. I wanted to ask a question, would you be comfortable to share that information with the ad hoc committee? Because I think it's, well, maybe if it's not the ad hoc committee, if for some reasons it may be a problem with the ad hoc committee, it could be another committee that deals with sensitive matters. You know, the reason why I'm raising that matter is because your intervention in this regard completely changes the storyline that we were led into by Mr. Nkabinde. Because now the trip, according to you, is right from point A to point B, as opposed to point A, point B, point C. Because he's the way he narrated the story and your journey. I mean, when he uses the term a boy's trip, it has certain connotations, which I'm sure you understand. So that's why I'm asking the question, in order to consolidate the evidence we are putting before us in challenging his assertion, would you be comfortable that that information become accessible?
I remember, I am a citizen in this country, and I know that information can be private, but some information is public. You only need to take an ID number of a person to punch it, and you get all the profile of the things that the person owns. So a vehicle is one of those. For me to hide and say I cannot give this committee the details of that vehicle would be wrong. For transparency, I'll hand over. It is not my car, I must disclose that. It's my wife's car. She controls the tracker. I've asked her to throw me the tracker, and she went and threw the tracker and she gave it to me. So you can have it. I don't think it's a problem. I don't think she will have a problem in sharing that either. But the tracker will show you that we left the address that Mkhwanazi put on his statement on that particular date, and we stopped at Mr. Mkhwanazi's residence at Mpange. We switched off, we went in, we drank coffee, we ate cookies. We greet each other, friendly talk, back into the car. We drove from there, we stopped in Durban. I was a driver.
No, I think, Chair, I'm raising that matter because I do remember you said the tracker is from a vehicle of your wife, and she is not before us. So we can only rely on you to engage with her to agree for that information to be made available. And I was asking precisely because I know the things relating to tracker and all of that will somehow involve identity information of an individual involved. But if you say it can be made available, I think we'll appreciate that because it addresses a particular issue with regard to the purpose of the trip from Durban to Northern Durban. I think the next issue I wanted to just to verify it has to do with at some point I remember you were inviting SBIA to come to the awards in KZN. And you know, sometimes because we are talking to you as police officers, one of the things that one has learned is that it's not everything that happens which is as we see it. Some of the things are happening not in a way that ordinary people, civilians like ourselves, who are not police officers, who are not trained there, will understand in the way in which, and I will tell you why I'm making this point when I'm asking the question subsequent to this one. But your invitation of SBIA to attend the awards, was it just an invitation?
You talk about the police awards?
Yes.
I did not invite him. It's national awards that were held in Durban.
Or it was national awards, so
Yeah.
he was going to be attending because it's part of the national program.
Yeah, I invited the entire management and the police chiefs to an excursion that I was organizing. So he joined the excursion that I was hosting, but he was there for the Excellence Awards. That is a national event. I did not invite him on that one.
Okay.
I'm not sure, maybe he said I invited him for Durban July either, because I spoke to him before Durban July, before the July 6th.
No, I don't remember him saying that. And then the meeting with Sinon, General Sinon, and Major General.
I'm going to invite this commission, this ad hoc committee to start getting used to using the constitutional titles.
Okay.
So that you don't get confused much about this general's rank. Say the commissioners, not.
Commissioner. Okay. But that meeting with Mr. Sinon, I think it's even safe to say Mr. Sinon and Mr. Matlala. I can't remember who said to us that meeting was in one of the units at the Pearls Hotel, and that person was making a conclusion on the basis of how easy it was to access whatever that was available in that room for consumption. And the conclusion was to the extent that, no, this is Mkhwanazi's a flat or apartment. I don't know if you have commented on that since you are back with us today.
Yeah, yes, I did speak early this morning, and I tried to describe the size of that apartment, the living room. Between the dining room where we were seated, the lounge where the TV is with only one couch, that's how small it is, and the kitchen, a small kitchen that is there. So I did explain to the members that if from one point to another in that room, it will not be more than 5 meters. That's how small it is, and in one bedroom. So if somebody were to say, if Nona said, at times I will go to the bedroom, then he will have an excuse of saying he didn't hear what we were talking about. But if he claims that he had gone to the fridge to get something to drink, the fridge was literally less than 2 meters from the table where we seated. If he goes to a fridge, he did not go to the fridge. I'm just saying if he did, but he did not go there. There was no alcohol drank on the day.
It was only water.
I think it was water and some juice there.
Okay.
There's no alcohol that was drank on the day.
That issue of, I think one of my colleagues was raising this question with you earlier on, and I want to take it slightly further. Is it Tibeti or Matibeti, the person?
Matibeti.
Matibeti. The party that I want to ask you to comment on, General, is the one that, because I think you had said earlier on, after the quarrel between you and him and the court challenges or proceedings that have taken place, you started getting some people from or who are associated with this company raising all sorts of things about the way in which business is being conducted, which is not proper and in line with our laws. How do we explain, or how do you understand, but how do we explain as well the seeming coincidence that at the time when he's on a toe-to-toe with you legally, and then people start saying things that were never said to you before you had a fight with him? What could be the reason for that?
Well, I think people maybe realize that they might have been afraid to come out until they realize that someone who's not afraid of Matibeti, then they feel free. I had said that the man is closer to Getsemane, one of the taxi bosses in KZN. Getsemane had issues with me. He still has, I believe. He has taken the police to court. He have gone to social media, podcast, and said all sorts of things about me. But I've never had anyone coming to me and say here is something we have against Nkhwanazi that must lead into a case. So there's no investigation that we have ever lodged against Nkhwanazi, despite of what he had said, of how he has behaved. So this is just to indicate that I'm not going all out to target a person. He's not a person that I target. That's why when I want to talk to him, I'll call him that I want to talk to you, because I don't have issues with him. Despite of how he feels about me and the SAPS, but that's him. So Matlala did the same thing. The fact that there's investigations happening is because evidence now comes before me. Before that, I'm sure people didn't even know me. That's why they didn't raise those things. Because when I looked at how old are these things that they're raising, some of them a couple of years old, and I asked, but why these things were not spoken? They said, no, we're afraid of this man. We thought he's that powerful, he controls everything. Until we see someone that can challenge him. That's why we feel that we must come to you.
You know, General, since for the past 6 months, since we started with the ad hoc committee, and I think with developments at the Matlala Commission of Inquiry, I suppose the country knows a lot now, more than what we knew before then. I'm just saying, during the lifespan of the ad hoc committee, the proceedings here and the proceedings in the Commission of Inquiry, I think people are much more educated about many things that are going on. Of course, some of them are yet to be verified, yet to be confirmed. Some of them might end in court. But I would imagine that to a very larger extent, the revelations that have been playing out in the public domain on their own should serve as a deterrent in terms of other police officers or anybody else in society engaging in the wrong activities similar to what we're dealing with. But I just want to know, and of course, more and above that being a deterrent on its own, the quality of the corrective measures that we should take as Parliament and the executive should add even a much more important weight in avoiding the recurrence of the same or similar situation in the future. But how much of what we have learned over these proceedings was well known already to somebody like you?
And there's well, I would say 50-50, but there's quite a lot of things that has come to the fore that I was not aware of as a police officer myself. There's other information that came to me that has not gone to both of these structures that have been established that I became aware of, such as what we spoke about Matlala as an example. Information of corruption that we start hearing about, that we otherwise I would have known or would not have known about it. But in the sense of it, then I realize that it's across the board. And the people that are mostly in the forefront of the wrong that's happening, especially outside the police, is involving procurement issues of government. There's a lot of corruption happening in there. The people are coming forward and exposing it. And the unfortunate part is that we have decided that certain level of corruption must only be investigated by the Hawks. So even if I'm aware of it, I must now pass it to the Hawks. And then when you pass it, you don't know what happens from there onward. And that's the only unfortunate part that happens. But by and large, the things are coming up. And we are getting information about things happening in other provinces. And then when you engage people, say, but go to the police station, open a case, and they will tell you, no, this one will go nowhere. And they'll come with some reasons as to why. And it kind of frustrates you. But that makes me realize that there's more problems that we have that otherwise are not known that we must start looking at, that the government must start looking at.
How do you suggest we deal with that, just that concern you have, that now things must be referred to the Hawks? If they are not referred to the Hawks, what else should be done? Because that may also have to do with the kind of legislation that we may have to propose at the end of our work. I'm hearing you saying something pops up and then you must refer it to the Hawks. And I get a sense that you are frustrated by that referral.
Yeah, well, I think in terms of the investigation reforms that need to have, and I'm going to invite you to take the legislation that established IDEC, that's NPA legislation. Look at what you're intending to achieve with it as government. Look at the legislation that amended the functioning of the SAPS in the establishment of the Hawks, and check what is it that the government intending to achieve with it, and then versus the South African Police Service. These are all three levels now established in the country to investigate cases. And how then you separate as a legislator, how do you separate who must do what in all these three investigating arms of our security cluster now? So if legislature takes that, because there's legislation that governs all this, then you go and look at the SOPs then that are developed amongst these three institutions. One of them is, how does IDEC take cases, who classify cases between DPCI, who classify cases of DPCI versus the one that are dealt with in the South African Police Service separately, a normal detective service within the SAPS, and what type of case then goes to IDEC versus that which is at DPCI. So when you start looking at that and see whether there is no abuse of the system in between, does each one achieve the objective of creating a safer environment in the Republic without being frustrated by the other one? If the case lands on this one's table that belongs into other body, how does this case moves over? Is it the senior body that comes and takes it, or is it the junior body that transfers it to the other structures? So what are the rules that are put out there? So I think we might want to investigate the cross-referencing of these three so that we're able to align it properly in terms of legislation. But in the center of all this, you have one police station that must service all the three. In the center of all this, we have one provincial commissioner that constitutionally is overseeing all these operations in the province. To what extent does this provincial commissioner have a say over what IDEC does, over what DPCI does? So those are the gaps that may need to be looked at so that you're able to close them.
I just want to go back to the question I asked earlier on and about the knowledge that you have, and you are saying 50-50 in terms of now looking back now, Commissioner, if the 31st of December did not arrive in the context of the letter from the minister, now looking back, I know it has arrived, but let's imagine it did not. And you know, almost 50% or something like that, even if it was 20% of the information that has now been displayed in the public domain. What were you going to do with it, or what were you going to do with it, or what do you think you should have done with it in an event where the 31st of December did not arrive? Not as a date, but in context, as that letter which has triggered all that has evolved up to the July press conference.
I must indicate that we have been operating, identifying some challenges, but the limitation that we had was to address those internal within the structures. Make recommendation of this, make recommendation of that. It is taken, it's not taken, and you leave it. But you see the problems, but you have a limitation in terms of addressing them. The level of involvement of senior police officers in criminality, it's something that we did not necessarily have any concrete evidence on. We will suspect. That's why I say there are colleagues that are beginning to question their lifestyle, but we're not necessarily conducting that lifestyle audit. And I kept on talking about it. You can see that this one looks like he's living large, and we don't know where he gets the money from, but nothing has been done. We therefore couldn't necessarily investigate anything going forward. We'll just leave it like that. But I think the events that took place that was informed by the letter has brought into light some of these lifestyles of these generals. Only then you get to realize, oh, this is where this thing comes from. Typical example, I was one of the people invited by Haarzavi when he got promoted to come and celebrate with him. I declined because we're not friends. And I thought, why must I go and celebrate his promotion? We're not friends. I'm not going there. They went there. Oh Lord, Gerald Kumar was there as well. I don't know if Matlala was there. Probably was there. There were a lot of them that were invited. And subsequently that there would have been other parties. But I don't think at the time anyone thought of anything about Sibia. I must be honest. He was a very flashy guy when he worked for the Hawks before. I was in a task force, and you could observe every time this heist task force was in the forefront on those heists. I would be there when they come to attend those crime scenes, and he will come there. Very fancy person with fancy suits, you know, like those people that goes to these modern churches. He was always flashy, but I couldn't connect as to what makes him to look like that. So now that we know what we know now, then you then say, but we saw these things back then, but we didn't necessarily dig to establish. So this has assisted us to say, when we suspect something, we then have to start probing. And part of what we then should do is these lifestyle audits that we are complaining about, we have to be very strict about, because maybe they might reveal things while it's still early that will help us going forward. You can't have a person who, like has been already revealed, you are building a R1 million house in one spot, at the same time you're building another R1 million house somewhere else. Who are you? Where do you get the money from? And you're driving a fancy car. So there are many signs that we might have neglected as management of the police that we saw, that we should have paid attention on. So I feel the way we're doing in terms of complaining, it's all what we could do, but there was limitation on that. Investigate when the information comes before you, but even that investigation doesn't take you far. But that's all we could do at the time.
No, thanks, General. I'm left with just two questions now. The last one, I'm going to be following up on your observation that part of the frustration is that things are being raised with the relevant authorities in terms of what needs to be done to, you know, to deal with problems within the police, and they are not acted upon. I'm going to come back on that issue because there is a matter I want to raise in relation to your boss, the National Commissioner, exactly around that issue. But I want to start with this one, which is, I'm saying, is the one before last. The cartel and the Big Five. Whether they are going to be confirmed at whatever point, who are they, but how do we defeat them? Because these are people that we have to defeat, given what we are told they are engaged on. From what we have heard, there is nothing that they are involved in which has got to do with our national interest. It's more about self-preservation and about their own personal interest, the advancements of those. How do we defeat them? Because at some point, we can't allow a group like that. We've got to find a way to defeat it.
Honorable members, there are a few things that they're involved in. And I feel the other two are something that maybe we might want to do something easy. I don't know about the third one, which might be a bit complicated. The third one, maybe if I must start with it, is the tenders of government. The process of how these tenders are issued and stuff like that is something that government must look at. Once a person is spoiled of always getting tenders every other place where they apply for, and they become rich, it becomes clear that for them getting these tenders is not because of exceptional things that they do that justifies it, but it's the connections they have, or maybe the envelopes that are crossing floors that leads into them getting these tenders. But that's a difficult part to address because it does not only involve the cartel squad, but majority of business people that are involved in tenders. They are benefiting from that or even affected by it. The other two environments that are more of a problem, and the second one in my list of priorities is cash and transit heist. And I would wish government can come up with a policy once and for all that's going to regulate the movements of money in the country. That is going to regulate the cash, the utilization of cash in our country. The lesser we use cash, the better. And I don't want to hear anyone telling me that in the rural areas there's no connectivities. People in the rural areas have got phones. If they can talk on the phone, they will. So I'm not saying totally you can get rid of cash. There's always going to be cash there. Not everyone else has got a bank account. There will be cash. But limit that to the most vulnerable areas where there's not large sum of cash is used. In the urban areas, here where we at in Cape Town, we just have no reason to pay cash in any of the shop in the Mokarong. There's not poor people that stays here. Yes, there are people sleeping on the street, but you and me can afford to pay with a card. So the moment you start introducing that, there's going to be less amount of cash that must be picked up here. A vehicle drives in the morning to come and load up ATMs. A vehicle drives in the morning and come and pick up money from the shops because we bought cash. So they have these in their drop safes. They must give it to these companies to go and bank them. So that's the second part in terms of cash in transit. And one of them, when you regulate the movement, we have suggested some typical examples that if the money is in the bag, that bag is taken from the shop to the car, when the money is in the car and this car is driving from point A to point B, there must be mandatory, at least, devices that are put into that vehicle so that there will be a robber. The moment it interferes with that truck, with that money is destroyed, cannot be used. A lot of things been tried. Ink is put into the paper. They take this paper with the ink, they get chemicals, they dump this money in a bucket overnight. The following day, that chemical is gone. They take the money and go and gamble with it. So if you can't use the money gets destroyed. There won't be need for you to even bomb the car. And explosives is a dangerous thing. So these criminals, they use it recklessly. And they're part of these drug dealers, this cartel, because it's easy money. So they blast these cars with the inside job, because they don't blast an empty car. People within, they will tell them this car has got so much money. Either the companies themselves or the clients where they pick up the money from. They will tell you, we've put so much money into this car, as it moves, get it. And they're going to get it on the road. And that increases the risk to society. It makes our country look like we're at war zone because there's bombing everywhere on this cash in transit. So the reforms on cash in transit and the use of cash in our country, I think is very urgent, especially on transportation of money, very urgent, something that government must look at. The last one and most important one, our borders. If we don't do anything about the control on the movement of our borders, we're not going to stop these drugs. Regardless of what we do with the cartel, we will not stop the drugs. I said when I presented that it is not only the big five that we have a problem with. They happen to be closer to the government officials, senior government officials, and take control of the entire security cluster. These five. But there's big dogs out there that are sitting and smiling, that are making billions of friends on bringing these drugs into the country and packaging them and reselling them. So until we control our borders, a typical example, police officers we have in the borders, they've been there for ages. The employment condition of a police officer, it's not easy for you to say You are here on a contract for 1 year, and after 1 year, you must move. We go through all the labor process to try and remove a person after we've placed a person in one spot, because there's no flexibility in terms of our labor laws, employment condition in the police. It must be looked at. It doesn't matter how good I might be about KZN, but the moment I'm so used to the port of entry on Durban and I'm so immense into corruption, whether it's taxis, whether it's CITs, whether it's stock theft, whatever it is, I might need to move from that province and go to another province. Take me and say, now go to Limpopo. You become a provincial commissioner and see you can do what you're doing here as a civil servant. But we don't do that. We become so used to the environment where you're working, and then the criminality then start cropping in, because these criminals either threaten us or they're going to bribe us. Either way. So that's what we see happening in the borders. And I must say that they still run tenders because they're controlling some of the procurements that are happening, and they still enjoy life.
No, thanks, General. That was important because my own view is that it's not enough to identify the problem. We have to find a way in which we can address the conditions through which they thrive. And I think your suggestions are intended to deal with that. Let me say, General, I think we might have never said this in your first meeting with us here, some of us. But I think I agree with the assertion that that we should applaud you for your courage. And I want you to understand me very well. In this case, applauding you for your courage is not necessarily agreeing with everything you said on that press conference. But the courage to stand up for something that you believe in, articulate it, and be willing to face consequences is what I think you must be applauded for. History will judge and time will judge as we conclude our work as ad hoc committee, as the Commission of Inquiry also concludes its work as to whether there was any value bigger than what you might have observed on the decision you took on that day to stand up and say something is not right and somebody has to do something. Why it's important that that courage is important to be applauded is because, and I'm saying, I'm not dealing with the merits. I'm dealing with because that is how our country was liberated. Some people had to take a decision that no matter what happens to me, but in this case, I am taking a particular position. And of course, if you take a position like the one you took, there are consequences. Like the one they took, those who liberated our country, there were consequences. Others were imprisoned, others died. But there's no way, even today, the country is going to succeed in terms of its development and reconstruction without men and women who are willing to take difficult position. And if it means they die and become martyrs because they acted in the best interest of the country. Now, with that being said, I asked your boss when he was here yesterday. I asked him, and I think I must ask you this question. And I know you might answer this question by saying we don't operate in the same way. And he said that when he was explaining to me that it's Mkhwanazi's way of doing things. I've got my way of doing things. I think it should be expected, at least by ordinary South Africans, that once you arise to that level, you must be a person that can be dependent upon to sacrifice, including himself or herself, for national interest. And I asked this question to General Masemula. If you did not go out in July, was he not going to proceed and implement the directive that he subsequently told us, now that you went out in public, he believed was not in the purview or in the domain or in the authority of the minister? I asked him that question and I said to him, I wanted him to do something that is not easy to do, which is to divorce Fanny Masemula from the National Commissioner. Because a National Commissioner must be a National Commissioner who may not be exactly Fanny Masemula in a true sense of what Fanny Masemula is when he's not the occupants of that particular office. And I asked that question because, and I'm asking it to you now, do you think that
Chief Whip.
he would have acted differently. Do you think that he would have acted differently had you not gone out in July?
Chief Whip. Your time is up. May you respond, General. His time is up.
Thank you so much.
But Skosana has also agreed to give me a minute.
Yeah, you're right, Honorable Member, we're not the same. The National Commission is a different person than me. And the truth is, what I'm saying this with respect to my boss, if, from what I'm told, Sbia and Kabinde did not oppose to the proposal, this team would be gone today. Because it seems like there was an agreement reached on the 6th of March with some amendments, but they already agreed that, no, we're going to wind this thing down. So we are shutting down in a way. Had that follow-up meeting that was held in Pretoria concluded, they would have signed that deal without Mkhwanazi in a way. And they were going to implement it. I'm saying this with that respect that it was Nkabinde's behavior and Sibia's behavior that led into the minister to say, I'm no longer going to have this meeting anymore. I think that kind of stalled everything. When I look at after the arrest of the members of crime intelligence that were responsible for the counter-intelligence investigation that was happening in Gauteng, members are kept in safe houses. They are operating with resources from intelligence. This management of intelligence is arrested, and they are told not to enter facilities of crime intelligence. I fly to Pretoria, and I challenge management the second day after they were released that the bail condition does not say they must not work. It says they must not enter the premises. They can still do this job elsewhere. The management disagreed with me. They said they must not. So they did not. Departmental investigation was conducted. They were cleared. After they were cleared, they were still barred from doing the work. There were meetings after meetings after meetings. I had to again travel to Pretoria and sit with my boss and say, let us be serious now. Do we want to kill this investigation yourself? Or you want these members to investigate? So you must decide, then the boss. It was that day when he eventually signed the letters that reinstate these members to do the work. I didn't travel back. Then the members that are doing the job started getting support. For the good almost 5 months, they were not getting support. So there was no energy coming from the management to make sure that these junior members that are doing the work, they continue with their job. I had to again go from KZN to make that done, to make that happen. We were talking here, it still pains me today, that despite of the sacrifice that these members have made over time, the commitment from the boss to say, we're going to acknowledge these members of PKTT for the work they've done, the president applauding these members. They are in the line of receiving awards. They are invited, they start buying suits and stuff like that. On the day after this letter is written, a decision is taken by management, my boss, that they are no longer getting anything because he doesn't want to upset the minister. To date, they've never received in a single paper a certificate that says, thank you for what you've done. To date, those members are sitting with sore hearts. To date. And I could see this pain in their faces. Fast forward to the GCI ops that uncovered all this corruption in Gauteng.